Today we're changing the rear struts on a 2005 Buick Lacrosse. Some tools you're going to need: a hammer, flathead screwdriver, 14mm wrench, 18mm wrench, 13/16 socket, 14mm, 15mm, some penetrating oil. I have a 3/8 ratchet, a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, 3/4 to take the wheel off, hearing protection, stylish safety glasses, and ideally you'll need an air hammer, but you could use a regular hammer. You're going to need a jack and jack stands. I'm going to jack the vehicle up right here on the rear pinch weld, where your owner's manual tells you to jack it up. Careful not to get the plastic. Slide your jack stand under, put it right there on the subframe, lower the jack. I use a 3/4 to remove the 5 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. Lay your parts out in an organized fashion. Next, we're going to remove the caliper. It'll give us room to get back here to these bolts, and when this sags down, it won't pull on this brake hose. I'm going to take the 14mm. Before you start doing anything, spray everything with WD-40 so it has time to sit. You got the sway bar end link and the 2 bolts there. Take your 15mm socket and your 14mm wrench. There's a hex head on the back of this sway bar end link. You're going to hold on to that. Remove the nut. Take your 13/16. Remove the lower strut bolts. And then thread them back on until the bolt starts to come out of the end of the nut. And the reason we thread them back on there, so when we pound them out, we don't mushroom the end of this bolt and make it impossible to get the nut back on. So you just want to hit it and they're really in there. That's why I said you should probably get an air hammer, but you could use the hammer. I'm going to put on our hearing protection and our safety glasses. Take the air hammer. Hammer those babies out. Just lightly tapping them out now. And that'll sag down the knuckle there. And we're gonna go into the trunk going to take our long 1/2-inch drive ratchet and a 15mm, and you have 3 mounting nuts on the top of this strut up here. I'm just going to loosen those off. Don't loosen the center one, or the spring will shoot that strut off of there. Oh, there it went. And you're just gonna guide it out of there. And the best way to replace these is to just buy the whole assembly. It costs a little bit more money, but you don't have to compress the old wore out spring, which is, it can be dangerous, and it's wore out anyway. You get a new spring, new mount, and a new strut. It saves you a lot of time putting it back in. You don't have to go buy any special tools. This label here says not to remove this nut because this spring is being compressed by the strut. And this one here says that the spring will sag over time if the ride height appears to be high. After you install this, give it some time and it'll settle down. Dust cap in there. Guide the new strut in. There we go. That's lined up. Pop the knuckle back in. Slide these lower strut mounts through the strut and the knuckle. There we go. And now while you got those holes up top lined up, slide the jack under there to hold it up there while you go into the trunk again and tighten those nuts. Take the new nuts they gave you with your strut, get them started by hand. Tighten them up. Bang these bottom bolts in there. Take the tension off of it though. Lower the jack. Just tap them in. And they'll come in the rest of the way by tightening them. Got these grooves in them. They're kind of pressed into that knuckle. So take your 13/16, tighten those down. And you watch them pull it in there. Doing the bottom one here. Pulled it right in. Put your sway bar end link back in there. 15mm. And we're not going to go super tight with this one. 14mm on the back side. While you're in here, you want to check your pads. Make sure you got a lot of pad left. Make sure that the caliper slides are sliding good. Oh, that one feels a little bit seized up. So we're going to go ahead and clean these out. They just pop out. Put some caliper lube on them. And this top one's got a rubber thing on it, so you want to make sure you put that one back in the top. Wipe those off. Spray them with brake parts cleaner. Spray them in here. That one's not gonna work. Go ahead and let that evaporate. Take your brake grease, coat it on there, put a little extra on the end, slide them back in there while you twist it to distribute the lube evenly. Wipe off any excess. The same thing on the top one. Put a little extra on the end. Goop that in there real good. Twist it in. Pop the boot back on. Wipe off any excess. Pop your calipers in. The warning bar goes on the inside, and it also has this little bump here on the back of the pad that locks into this groove on the caliper. That's how you know that one goes on the inside. The outside one does not have that. Face of the pad goes toward the rotor. Get your caliper bolts, 14 millimeter. Twist these pins so that these are facing like that, so the caliper can slide in there. Get him started by hand. Tighten those up. I'm gonna pop the wheel on. Get the 5 lug nuts started by hand. Take your 3/4 socket, tighten them down to the manufacturer's torque specs. And you want to go straight across so that it seats against the rotor evenly. Pop your center cap back on. Pick the car up on the pinch weld here. Pull the jack stand out.
Yeah, that's always nice.
Lower the vehicle. And that's how you replace the rear struts on a 2005 Buick Lacrosse. Do the same thing on the other side and you're all set.